All right, it is 7 o'clock and people are still coming into the room, which is wonderful. So as we're getting started, welcome. I am Bill Brown, the Director of Innovative Evangelism for the Baltimore-Washington Conference, working also with the Peninsula Delaware Conference. So I am so excited to see both of the conferences from our Episcopal area with us tonight. We have got a robust number of you who have shown up, and we have a lot of information to cover tonight. I always like to say, if you would drop in the chat just who you are and where you're from, gives everybody an idea that even though we are in separate places, we are not alone. Just make sure when you're using the chat to select that you're sharing with everyone. If you do have a question tonight, we will be taking questions throughout the presentation. So use the Q&A feature for your questions. Please don't use the chat because your question will get lost in the chat, guaranteed, and we don't want to miss any of your questions tonight. The chat, it's saying the chat is disabled. Let's try this again. Now you can use the chat. If your host would remember to select the right button, we would be all set. So let's try this again. Everyone should be able to use the chat. I'm going to give Tisha a shout out, or Tisha a shout out for alerting me that the chat was disabled. And we see people, and if you want to put in which the name of your church, or if you want to put in which annual conference you're with, it's just awfully wonderful to know that other people are with us. Let me open us with a word of prayer, and then I'll introduce our presenters tonight, and we will jump right in. So let us pray. Holy and gracious God, we give you thanks for gathering us together tonight from around our Episcopal area, whether we are in West Virginia or Maryland or the District of Columbia or Delaware. We know, oh God, that your Spirit unites us together. I give you thanks for John and Dave as they join us tonight to guide us through this important topic. And pray, oh God, that your Spirit would be upon us to give us insight, wisdom, and understanding. We pray this all in the name of Jesus. Amen. So we are joined tonight first by Dave Schoeller, who is our Director of Business Systems, and also his partner in crime, John Gauthier, our Data Analyst and Applications Administrator. I thought, John, I had a long title. Yours is excellent. You win. And I know this is a busy time of year for our participants tonight, as we are a week away from Christmas Eve. But I also like to remind people that these topics are more than just the numbers we have to enter into a report, because I really, really believe behind every number is a name, and behind every name is a story, and every story matters to God. And so I like to keep that perspective. So gentlemen, good evening, welcome. I'm going to turn my stuff off and turn it over to you.
Good evening, friends. So thank you again, as Bill, just to echo what he was noting, thank you for being here, and thank you for taking your time and going through this with us. We're excited to have this, the opportunity to do this with you, and excited to work with you on this. So this will be the guidelines and training for the 2024 statistical reporting, just in case you didn't know where you were. And this will apply for both Peninsula Delaware and Baltimore-Washington conferences. I'm going to be demonstrating using the Baltimore-Washington conference setup within AC Stats, but the principles outlined here will apply for both conferences. So if you don't recognize some questions from the PDC side, don't worry. We have not changed your questions at all, which is a great lead into this year. First off, our introductions. That Bill has already taken care of that for us. I want to move off to who we are overall. So first off, you've met Dave and I. Tanya Bennett is going to be helping answer some questions today. She's the Frederick District Administrator, and she's probably one of the most experienced district administrators we have at the conference. She's basically someone that is a rock that I've always relied upon, and she's amazing. Our finance administration team is many and broad, but Paul Eichelberger is the PDC and BWC Treasurer and Director of Administrative Services, so he kind of leads the boat there. And then for PDC, you guys know your district administrative assistants. We have Those names are actually updated. We have new folks for PDC. I apologize. I thought I had that in there. We have for Delaware District, Andrea Lanker, who's also another rock of for us over in the PDC district. And we have Tanya. I'm missing her last name. Apologies. Thank you for your patience. Apologies. We have Tanya Skinner for Upper Shore District, Administrative Assistant, and Sarah Waters for Lower Shore District, Administrative Assistant. So when you guys hop in there and get to know them if you haven't had a chance to contact them already. And for the Baltimore-Washington Conference, we have Christine Taylor for Baltimore Metropolitan, Sherrill Cole for Washington East in the Greater Washington District sections, Sophia Mayer for Central Maryland and Greater Washington District, Tanya Bennett again for Frederick District, Kayla Harkim for Cumberland Hagerstown District, Charles Carrington for Baltimore Suburban District, and we're benefited by a very talented district superintendent who's doubling right now as a district administrator for Annapolis and Greater Washington. So if you hear one of us pick up the call or answer something for you for Annapolis District, just know that you're being cared for by the whole team there. Just to give you an idea of what we do and why we do it and why it's important. So what we collect are the membership participation, church assets and expenses, and church income from your churches, that data throughout the year. And those local church statistics are important because they help to guide and give us an integral understanding of the health of the conference through every individual church. And it's the groundwork we use for determining our connectional resources and mission shares. That is collected through AC Stats, which is a website run by the by the General Conference Administration. General Council, I'm GCFA. Sorry, brain is tongue-tied right now. Couple important dates. On January 2nd, we are opening stats for reporting. Now, it'll be open to you as soon as we get out of here for you to log in, set up your accounts, and get familiar. But we're not asking you to dive in and start reporting until, obviously, all the data is in on January 2nd. But if you want to hop in and explore and get everything set up so that right on January 2nd, you hit the ground running, that's not a problem at all. And we have Wednesday, January 29th at midnight as the reporting deadline. Now, we try and be as generous as possible with if you guys need extensions and stuff like that. But if you absolutely cannot meet that deadline, we need to know as soon as possible. And there's not a lot of leeway for how much time after that is available. The deadline's pretty solid. So as soon as possible, get those stats into the system, and let us know if you have any issues. So you can't manage what you measure, and the discipline says we have to. That's why we need to do the statistical reporting. So it's part of our discipline, part of the Methodist polity and experience, and your church's statistical reports we use to evaluate the vitality, evaluate the needs that the conference sees that you have for being able to distribute different resources, to draw comparisons among our entire congregation through the entire connection, to compute the congregation's new mission share or apportionment, depending on the nomenclature, and provide critical information to the cabinet about congregations and pastors to make new appointments. So all of this is vital for us understanding what is happening in the church and how best to facilitate the connection. So we're going to say accuracy is heavenly. It's next to godliness. So as best as you possibly can, we need accurate information. If you're not able to give accurate information, it skews our understanding, just as we were saying. So if you don't have the capacity for something, or if you have more capacity, that it makes it harder for us to know what is the best choice to make in a certain situation. So accurate statistics provide both local and church conferences a reliable window into your financial and congregational well-being. And the best practices for stats reporting is good planning and record keeping. So early and often, be tracking what you have when it comes to your church membership, your financial state, everything. Care, concern, and honesty for those things that are being taken. Always have redundancy. Double check the numbers that are being recorded. Verify with each other. This is not about an emotional thing. It's entirely about making sure that what is being done is done as accurate to reality as possible. Double checking your work, having someone else review your work, and not fudging or making guesses or anything like that. Those kinds of things can really cause problems. And then explaining major year-to-year differences. So one of the features within the AC stats reporting system is flagging things that go above a certain threshold of change. So whenever you have an opportunity to let us know why something has changed, that's a hugely important piece for us. AC Stats is, as we were saying, GCFA's stats reporting site. It's located at stats.gcfa.org. There's no www in the website. Where you can find more information for BWC, it's bwcumc.org. I'm sorry, excuse me. For Pendel, it is, I'm going to actually pop that in there. Apologies, my version of this is not saved as I was hoping.
I got you, John. It's so that for Pendel is your Pendel website, pen-del.org, and it's /statistical-reporting.
All right, and I've got a slide with that on the end too, so we'll remind you where to find that information. And so when this is done, we'll actually have this set up, have this recording for you at the end of that with all the resources that we provided here. Moving on. So user account registration and setup. Dave, did you want to pop in here, or would you like me to keep going?
Sure, I can pop in. So for the AC stats system, as John mentioned, I know each conference has their own systems where they do a lot of administrative work. Brick River for Peninsula Delaware and Arena for Baltimore-Washington. But we do want to stress that the system is a separate system, AC Stats. Every year, the initial login changes, and every year, GCFA, who manages the system, because there's always change in pastoral appointments, leadership of committees, that sort of thing, they found that it's best to wipe the slate and start fresh every year so folks can get up and running and people who are affiliated with the church can be in that church. So the initial login, the ID number that you want to put in is your church's general church number. Sometimes it's referred to as GCNO. That number has been distributed via email in a stats kickoff announcement. You can also, one of the fastest and easiest ways to look it up is the GCFA's umdata.org site. That is a public site where key parts of your statistical reports are displayed across 30 some years. And you can also look up your church while you're actually looking at some of your church stats if you'd like. So you can go in there, look up your GCNO number, and get that for your login. One big improvement this year, the system allows multiple people from the church that can log in for different roles. They also allow you to have multiple usernames. That's a big improvement we'll touch on next, where some pastors we know have multiple churches. Some people that work in cooperative parishes sometimes serve on committees in multiple churches. So GCFA has taken a lot of feedback to heart, and they now allow people to have multiple usernames for the same person under different churches. So we're very excited about that. All that said, we always do encourage churches to try to nominate one person to do the actual data entry. It is a live form that every time you tab out of a field, it's saving your entry, which is great if you're the only one entering the data. But if you have multiple people doing that, you're going to be competing against each other and trying to update the system at the same time, which obviously is not a great thing. And so although it's great to have multiple people in the system looking up answers to questions and that sort of thing, just try to have one person that's in charge of the data entry. The registration process is very simple. John will walk you through in the live part of live demonstration part of the Training Tuesday, but it really is very simple. It's just going to ask you for your name and email address, and it's an optional phone number as well. So it's very quick and easy. Any corrections to the church information, they're going to have very basic information about your church. If you see something that needs to be corrected, just let your district administrator know. Don't delay your statistics. Sometimes we will get folks that there's a phone number that's off or an email that's off listed on their church. We can take care of that offline in the systems that we use. So just keep going and working on your stats and let the district administrators take care of that. Okay, so the system every year will display two columns next to each question. The first column will give you the data that you put in the year before, and the column on the right will be blank where you can input your current stats. There are options when you first get in. John will cover this as well, where you can, and we really do recommend this, you can print your stats so that you have that format, last year's information and blanks for this year. We find that works well for churches. You can print your stats out. If you have multiple people working on things, you can send them their sections and let them get working on it. And again, that all kind of boils down to collecting everything at the end and having one person put it in. As John mentioned, touched on briefly, the system is very good at trying to catch and look out for large variations in numbers. So you will see alerts pop up depending on where that threshold is flagged to try to help you identify things that you may have input correctly. Really, it's just trying to catch things before you save and finalize your stats. And then there is an option as well for if there was an actual large change in a number, we just want to know that you noticed it and you let us know that you're aware of it and why it happened. That way we will, and there's a very small area there where you can put a very brief explanation and let us know that you're aware of it. And that way we won't worry about it being a possible data entry error, and we can then move on. Next slide.
Sorry. Nope.
Okay, so as I touched on, there's actually several new features this year. One of the most requested features, obviously, we all have way too many passwords to remember nowadays. And as much as you hope and pray that you're going to remember the last one you put in, it blends in your mind with all the 55 others you have. So the stat system now has a self-service password reset process. In previous years, it was just kind of a link that says contact your district office, and your district administrator or your person that's in charge of the stat system would have to manually go in and reset it. Obviously, that's probably the last thing you want to do is wait for somebody to get your email and get that taken care of, especially if you're trying to meet a deadline for stat. So now you will not have to do any of that. You can just reset your password and the new password will be emailed to you, and the system will take care of that. So we're very excited about that, and that will be a nice feature for everybody. Okay, so table one, just want to walk through, there's 3 tables for statistics. Table one is all about membership and participation activities. So first off, you will see at the top of your stats the closing membership number from the previous year. It's really the only field that you cannot change because it's set in stone from that's your ending number from last year. So you'll see that as kind of your starting point. And then there are multiple categories of people coming and going that may either increase or decrease your church's membership throughout the year. Obviously, professions of faith, baptisms, additions by birth and death. So all of those categories are presented to you. And at the end of that section, you will have the new kind of closing membership for the year. Also, in the membership profile section, you're asked questions to break down your membership by race and by gender. All of these various ways that your membership is broken down are all kind of cross-checked against each other. So if you have tallied up your total as being, say, you have 150 members, and then when you're breaking it down by, say, gender, it's coming up to be 145, the system will flag that discrepancy. So it kind of keeps an eye on it for you just in case you happen to have the numbers incorrect. The second section of Table 1 is asking you about the participation in the various activities of your church. Average worship attendance, beginning back in COVID, GCFA realized that COVID really kind of accelerated the use and adoption of online worship. So just be aware that there is a section in the average worship area that asks you for in-person worship and online worship. There are some there's some information in the training pages of both sites that kind of touch on the definition, various systems that are used. Everybody uses different platforms, YouTube, Facebook, that sort of thing. So there are some kind of helpful hints in counting that total for online worship. Also, we touch on Sunday school worship and all the categories of Sunday school, youth, young adults, and that sort of thing. United Women of Faith and United Methodist Men participation, and also budgets in some of the areas, and also the participation in missions and ministry programs. One thing to remember in recording those numbers are typically you don't double count people. They should be, for Sunday school, obviously they're going to be in one age group or another. We always ask folks to just really read carefully the questions, how they're stated. Sometimes it might be how many people are serving in a certain mission area. There might be another question that says how many people are served in a certain mission area. So just keep an eye out for that as you're going through Table 1. Next. So Table 2. Table 2 is the area where we report the assets of the church, any debt from loans, and then the expenses of the church. The expenses for both conferences are the basis of the mission share or apportionment calculations. So typically these are the compensation for pastors and associate pastors, compensation for staff, the cost of operating expenses, program expenses, and then any other staff, whether it's contractors, that sort of thing. So those are the core of what the mission share calculations are based on. There's a little bit of a variation between each conference. But for both conferences, and this is a very important point, neither conference apportions any expenses that are associated with missional activities of the church. So obviously churches have a wide array of activities in that area. That can be community outreach programs. Some churches have mission or nursery school and preschools, and feeding ministries and that sort of thing. So if it's an expenditure for mission activities, it is not included as a part of your mission share calculations. And then we do want to, excuse me, also do want to highlight on this slide One of the areas where we see some misreporting, and unfortunately it causes quite a large variation or increase in mission share apportionments. So capital expenditures, which are major repairs to the church. So unusual, infrequent repairs, usually over around $1,000, are considered a capital expense, as opposed to just a regular expense for maintenance type of activities. So we want to make sure that you see it's typically underneath your operating expenses. There's a line for those types of expenditures. Again, because they are large expenditures normally, we want to make sure that you do not lump those into your normal day-to-day operating expenses. So make sure even before you are filling out your stats, if you have those type of expenses or you had some major repairs this year, take a few minutes and make sure that that number in the reporting that you're getting from your treasurer or whoever is not lumped in with your total operating expenses. And then there's also areas where you can include, if you have a short-term rental agreements and that sort of thing as well, that they're outside of the operating expenses. Next. So compensation, want to touch on that. For both conferences, the compensation should in general match what you have reported to your conference that you're going to pay your pastor. So this is going to be 2024 statistics. So back in 2023, when you had your church conference, you filled out forms that let the conference know how much you were paying your pastor, and you broke that compensation structure down by base salary, other compensation, and that sort of thing. So for the most part, that information should match up fairly closely with your statistical reports. We realize sometimes just due to payroll timing and that sort of thing, there might be a couple thousand off depending on how many weeks there are in a year. Sometimes there's an extra payroll cycle. Sometimes you may have reported that you plan to pay the pastor X amount for reimbursables, but the pastor may not have purchased that much or been reimbursed for that many expenses. So use that church conference reporting as a guideline. It should match up very quickly or closely to what you have reported there. And sometimes there may be a variation in the housing and compensation split. But again, as long as the totals are adding up, that's really what's most important. We do want to highlight and talk about one area of misreporting. So each conference has an area to report the health and pension expenses for the clergy or the pastor. Those are separate and apart from the compensation package. We see quite frequently when folks are reporting, they will sometimes include that number as part of the compensation. And what that ends up doing is then you're double reporting that expense. So make sure you are splitting that out and keeping that separate from the compensation package. Also, another area where folks get into trouble, each conference we see more and more multi-point charges or cooperative parishes. For the statistical reports, we want to, we like to say it's really it's a cash basis reporting. And so if you actually paid the money, that's the amount you report. So the example that I want to use is if you have two churches in your multi-point charge and you have filled out a compensation form that says the pastor's making $50,000 for the year, don't automatically put $50,000. We don't want each church to report $50,000. What we're interested in is what each church paid towards that pastor's compensation. So if it was an even split, each church should have $25,000 on their statistical reports or whatever they have agreed to. We see that quite frequently where each church will just write down the pastor's compensation package, but that's not actually what they paid. So keep that in mind if you have multiple churches in your charge. Again, I'm going to touch on capital campaign. is different from capital expenses. So capital expenses are large, infrequent maintenance needs or unusual needs for the church, where you might have to replace an entire roof or paint the whole building, that sort of thing. There's also a breakout for capital campaign and funding expenses. It's a little bit confusing because it's a capital expense, capital campaign. But capital campaign is when we are discussing if you're having a special fundraising expense. Some churches may be putting an addition on, and they have a church gathering. They might have a catered event, rent a tent, that type of thing. Those are all capital campaign and fundraising expenses. Make sure you break those out. There's an area on table 2 to report those. So those are special higher dollar expenses. What should not be broken out and should be included as just part of your normal operating expenses is just your normal supplies that are so envelopes, mailing of statements, that sort of thing. But if you're doing something a little bit above and beyond, so the example here that we talk about are consulting costs. If you bring in a consultant, sometimes churches will have a fundraising consultant or a stewardship consultant, or they're sending out flyers about their capital campaign. Those are okay to include, but not the typical just day-to-day expenses of collecting the money. In and out costs, we like to mention that because it's very typical area of just the life of a church. For example, your youth may be going on a trip. You might be sending youth to Ignite in this coming year, and the youth pastor, youth coordinator will go on to our website and they will purchase 20 tickets for Ignite, and they will pay for that expense. Then they will go and let folks know that they have 20 tickets, and the parents of the youth will pay the church back for those tickets. We like to let you know that that is really a wash. So don't just report that expense as the initial expense for the tickets. Really, it's a wash. You have been reimbursed for that expense. So that would not be included in your statistics. Obviously, if you're being reimbursed just a portion of the expense, then you're just going to report the difference. But in general, if it's just something where it's an in and out, whether it's trips or materials for a project that people are reimbursing you for, we have an example there. Church suppers, it's another area. The church obviously is paying money for the food, and then they're collecting money for the supper at the event. So again, you want to look for the difference between that expense and the reimbursement. And then one area too is anything for mission and outreach for childcare. For the BWC, we have actually an additional area or additional table where you can report the utility expenses for childcare services or utility expenses for other mission and outreach programs for the church. So if you have, some churches have a winter shelter, winter relief type programs where the church is in use all week long, housing folks that are trying to keep them out of the cold. In the BWC, we have a special area where you can report those as missional expenses as well. So keep an eye out for that. Table 3 is all about the income the church receives throughout the year. This is our...
Dave, I'm going to interrupt for a second. Before we move away from expenses, people caught a spark and have a number of questions about expenses. So I don't want to get too far into income. And what's interesting is, as you probably know, doing this every year, and I get to sit here every year, we get some of the same questions. A number of questions around capital expenditures. You threw out a number, and somebody wanted to make sure they didn't miss that number. What was your suggested threshold, your low-end threshold to consider something a capital expense? I think you said $1,000.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so $1,000.
John, you can check me on that. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. And would capital expenditures include every building that the church owns, for example, the parsonage?
Yes, the expenses for whether it's the church or church building are reported on your statistics, which they generally are, and you have a related capital expense for that building, then yes, you would want to make sure that is broken out and not reported as a part of your typical operating expense. And also on the $1,000 side, I do like to give the example. Sometimes churches will decide, you know what, for 2024, we're going to paint the church. We're going to hire Bill the painter, and we're going to pay him $500 a month to paint all the rooms on the inside of the church. You're looking at the total expense for the repair. So just keep an eye out if it's incremental expenses throughout the year. It doesn't have to be a single lump sum that you pay for the expense. It's really the total associated with that expense that you want to keep in mind.
So you use the example of painting. Somebody else asked a question about what if the communication system's been updated? Is that a capital expense?
Yeah, that's typically a very infrequent upgrade. It's really the frequency is really the key to look at. Things that are happening all the time, a monthly cost. Taking it back to that communication example, if it's the cost to stream your online worship every month, that's a regular program expense. But if the church has decided, hey, we're going to start an online worship experience, and we're going to have an AV board and cameras and that sort of thing, we're going to really make an investment in it. You invest $10,000 in that. That would definitely be a capital expense.
So what I hear you saying is if it's an ongoing expense, that's one thing. But if it's either the upfront cost or the replacement cost, and it hits that $1,000 threshold, someone should count that as a capital expense.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, a couple of other expense questions. One of our churches in 2023 had a full-time clergy person, but they're currently with a part-time clergy person. But they're using the statistics from the year 2024. Is that correct?
So that's a common question. So the statistics, people are thinking about the compensation from a pastor they may have had the last time they did statistical reports. That's where I'd like to say, statistical reports are really on a cash basis. So if you had in 2023 a full-time pastor and you were paying them X, and that changes for 2024, your statistical reports will change. So it's just whatever cash outlay you had is what you report. And sometimes, I mentioned the clergy compensation. We do realize that the guide is to look at what you reported for church conference the prior year. But again, we realize that sometimes appointments change and folks go from full-time to part-time. So it really is the actual outlay for that pastor.
Okay. Here is a complicated question that may affect, it's a specific church, won't say which church because I don't know, but it may affect several of our charges. So in this particular 2-point charge, one church pays everything in terms of the pension,
Health benefits.
and health benefits. Thank you, John. Towards a little brain freeze for the pastor. And then the second church reimburses the 50%. So it makes it look like one church is paying 100% if it goes by arena or goes by the stats. How should they handle that?
So that's a great question, and that is not all that uncommon, and that really does fall into kind of the in and out expense. You want to report what the actual amount you paid. So if you are paying $100 and someone's reimbursing you $50, and somebody asks you, hey, how much did that cost you? You're going to say $50. You're not going to say $100. So it's just whatever the difference is, whatever the church is actually outlaying after it's all said and done. That's the number.
Now, the person has a follow-up question because I believe this is the data that's in Arena because they're saying the conference is entering that data into Arena, but Arena and the AC Stats platform are two different things.
Yep.
So they're able
Correct.
to enter that correction into the AC Stats report?
That's correct.
Yes.
That's where I mentioned we know that the breakdown of the compensation package may change, or a church may report that they plan on having a housing amount of X, but sometimes the pastor might, at the beginning of the year, have discussions with the church to say, hey, you know what, I might have a little bit more, a little bit less in housing, but the total compensation package is the same. So we realize the numbers and the breakdown of the numbers may change. So that's where we just let churches know that amount that you report just should be used as a guide. We realize that things may change. So don't worry that if you reported a pastor's making $50,000, but at the end of the 2024, it ended up being 47.5 or that sort of thing. Just use that as a guideline.
Okay. Then you had mentioned about missional uses for the church, and that some of those missional uses can be excluded from the expense side. And I think an example you used was a preschooler and nursery school. There we go. Thank you. Somebody's asking, what about expenses for childcare during worship?
So childcare during worship is typically a program expense, and the differentiation there is the missional expenses are generally an outreach to the community. The childcare during service is really part of the church's operations and part of their worship expenses that they're incurring. That typically is a program expense fee.
Thank you very much. You've just gone through all of the expense questions. So let's jump into income. I'll go play.
Okay, so table 3 is all about income. The top of the table you will see is discussing the income from the church members, the various types from pledged income, so money that is being collected where you can tie it to a specific person or family, so things that checks or cash that's coming in envelopes. There's a spot for money from someone who may not have put in a pledge, but they're giving anyway. And then unidentified givers, that's really talking about the plate income, the checks and cash that are in a plate, I should say cash. So anything that you really can't tie back to a giver. So all those categories are in there. In addition, some special categories are money from interest and dividends and sales of church assets. There is an area for rental fees that the church may receive and the income from a fundraising campaign. You may have remembered that I talked about fundraising expense. So table 2, so taking that income example, the church decides they're going to have a big fundraising campaign. The expenses of that special fundraising campaign are all going to be reported on table 2, and then the actual proceeds of that fundraising campaign are reported on table 3. Capital income from fundraising campaigns. There's also an area for memorials and endowments, and then special projects from UMM and UMW. There's also an area for where the church is reporting they're giving towards special Sundays, and other areas of special giving are all reported on table 3. Again, if it's income coming into the church, that is where it is reported. There is nothing on table 3 that is a part of an apportionment formula. This is all on the income side of the equation. So keep that in mind as you're reporting your income.
And that is what we have for just an overview of the tables. I'm going to move into just just a walkthrough of how to use the AC Stat system. And we're going to look at some of the table that Dave was referencing there. Did we want to answer any questions for, it looks like we don't have any questions at the moment for income.
I do want to say welcome to Tanya Bennett, who has joined us as a panelist. Don't know if she'll turn her camera on, but welcome, Tanya.
Hi, Tanya. Thank you so much, Dave.
Sure.
All right. So when you initially log in, you're going to want to use your 6-digit GCNO, or for Peninsula Delaware folks, that's your GCFA number. Those are interchangeable numbers.
John, can you blow that up a
Sure.
click
Absolutely.
for the middle-aged among us?
See if I can get it fix a little bit here.
Yeah, that helped. Thanks.
All right. Sorry about that.
It's
I keep forgetting my eyes.
John, I'm going to interrupt you just because we have an income question that just popped in and wanted to keep it together. Somebody's asked about the interest and dividends from investments that the Mid-Atlantic Foundation is holding. Is that also considered income?
Great question. So if it's not pulled out of the investment, if it's just like a reinvestment of dividends, all that will do is change the value of the asset. So on table 2 is where you would report the asset. So if you had $50,000 in an asset and it was increasing with dividend and reinvestment throughout the year, and it went from 50 to 55,000, you would see the previous year stats. You see 50,000 as an asset. The next year you would see 55,000. Now, if you decided, hey, we have an expense, we could use that $5,000 in dividends that we earned throughout the year, and you pull that out of the investment, that would be where you would report that on table 3, because that actually is real income to the church that's going into the church account or used for an expenditure.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Sure.
Thank you, John, for letting me interrupt you. Carry on.
Absolutely. Thank you, kindly. So as we were saying, once you your initial login will use your GCNO or GCFA number. And without an existing, if you already have an existing account, which you won't when your initial login, you'll use your username and password. You'll notice that we have the forgot password link down here. Well, this actually will take you to a forgot password dialog this time instead of emailing your DA. Your initial password will be stats 2024 with an exclamation mark. And if you're not sure what you're typing, there's always the little I over here. You can pop it open and see what you got. When you initially log in, you'll be greeted with identify yourself with your conference. Ignore this conference number. This is actually from something else. But you should see if someone else has already logged in for your church with that GCFA number or GCNO number, you'll see their name here. If you don't see a name here, don't be alarmed. It's just in the case where someone has logged in before you and already registered for with your church. So when you're ready to register, click here to register. There are a few required fields: first name, last name, username. This is the new piece we were talking about before. This is where you get to select a username that's unique to you. So. And then your email address. From here, you'll choose your role, pastor, etc., and your primary phone number. You do not have to put your address and other information in there if you don't wish to, but yeah, you can if you'd like to. Password is where you select a password that's unique to you, and this will be the password you use from here on out to log in. And again, if you need to, you can pop in there and see what it is. So if you do not have the same password for both, it does a test, and it says passwords do not match. And when you're all set, register with local church. You should, for every successful thing you do in here, you should receive a green successful the registration or submission, etc. It's part of the design language of this. From here, there's an opportunity to review your church details. Again, if you see something incorrect, please contact your district administrator, and that we will be able to take care of that from there. If that's correct, you hit save. Oh, sorry. Hit, excuse me, annual report. And that will take you into your system. Now, our test churches are a little mucked up, so I'm actually going to switch to a different screen here for a moment. Bear with me for a second. And there we go. So when you log in your next time, the first thing you will see is your church details. This will give you an opportunity. Again, if you see something wrong that you missed the first time, feel free to let your district administrator know. You hit annual report. This will take you into the actual reporting system. First time it opens up, it may take a couple of moments for it to assemble everything, but it should not take very long at all. Across the top here, you'll see for both Pendel and for BWC, we'll have a note that will lead you to the outside Peninsula Delaware splash or Baltimore-Washington conference splash page that have additional resources, training guides, etc. The recording of this, anything you need. So if you get lost along the way, feel free. That note will always be at the top of your when you go into enter church information. Again, make sure that all this stuff is correct before you start entering data, because if for some strange reason you accidentally have logged into another church, or for instance, if you have multiple churches and you're logged into the wrong church, verify that you have the right church before you start entering data. Because as you start entering things, it will overwrite and save, which is a feature. But if you already have information in there that's from someone else, that can be a bug. So just be aware of that. Up here, you have the opportunity to leave a specific note to us or to GCFA that will allow us to address anything that you want to that is necessary for us to fix. So, for instance, if you see something incorrect and you just want to capture it in there, that's not a bad spot. Moving on, the tables are set up so that we have a comparison as you go of last year's numbers and this year's numbers. There are a few things that are filled in from last year. So, for instance, total professing members reported at the close of last year is at the top here. So that should match this number at the bottom. If that doesn't, something's wrong and you should let us know. But as you go through the membership, as Dave was mentioning, this is basically additions and subtractions. So anytime you see new members received or restored, those are additions. A correction to previous year's errors, totaling professing membership numbers by addition. That's a question for if you have something that you need to correct from last year. Again, transferred in is addition. So in from United Methodist churches or non-United Methodist churches. It's pretty self-explanatory as you go through. And then received from closed United Methodist churches. Then from 5A, or from there on, it's a different number setup for Pendel. So don't be alarmed by the numbers. These are subtractions. Members removed, members withdrawn, correcting previous years by subtraction. So if you need to add folks from last year that didn't get counted, you put it up in here. If you need to remove folks that should not have been counted from last year, you put it here. Members transferred out to both United Methodist churches, non-United Methodist churches, or folks who have passed. All those should add up to a new number if you have changes. If you have all zeros, it'll be the same number. But it's just for an example, we can, oh, it's not open. As you add folks in here, this number will increase or decrease. And again, as we said, there's a threshold for certain things. This number down here, as you get into ethnicity, This number needs to match this number. So as you start adding folks into these cells, if that number does not match, you'll receive a flag saying that you need to provide an explanation for that. Moving down.
Hey, John, can I interrupt you real quick?
Absolutely.
Before you get any further, do you want to show what the where the toggle for allowing folks to see more explanation about every question is?
Yeah. Thank you kindly. So right up here on the left is the display question help. So if you turn this on, it'll give the direct explanations for each of these questions to provide a little more context. If you are going through the questions and you think you need some extra help, that might be a good place to start at least. And if that doesn't answer, then you can feel free to contact us. All right. Moving into ethnicity again, this number needs to match this number. So as you're adding folks of various ethnicities, they need to total the same as your total professing members at the close of this year. The same thing for gender. As you add folks, this number should match your total professing members. And then we get into activities. So attendance and baptisms. So this is where your record of the average amount of worshipers per week for your church would be. And then below that is the worshipers online. Again, there are some explanations here, but also in the training detail, the step-by-step manual we have on the websites have a little broader detail about how you can calculate it as well. There are also resources at GCFA for determining that number. Infants and children baptized, teens and adults, and their total. Get into Christian formation groups. Again, this is participation in your church, the numbers of folks that are in your various groups per week. Classes and other VBS and other groups. It'll say specifically what they're looking for. For instance, this one, number of participants enrolled in confirmation preparation classes that completed this year. So not just those who are enrolled, but those who have actually completed it, et cetera. And then the next one's average weekly attendance for Sunday school classes and groups. So just make sure you're paying attention to the language of the question to make sure that number is correct. And just as a caveat, we haven't changed anything. None of the verbiage of the questions has changed. The requests have changed since last year. So if you've gone through this last year, then it should be very much the same thing. Going on to membership for different groups, United Methodist Men and United Women in Faith. And then your missions teams. UMBIM and so teams sent. So that's the number of total teams and the number of people participating in any UMVIM teams. Then you have ministry engagement. That's the number of total community ministries for outreach. And then these two will total into 33. So there, throughout the entire set of tables, you will encounter several sub-questions that will total into another question. If you find a question you're not able to enter information into, it's likely because the question, an associated question, for instance, 33A or 33B, will total into that ultimate question, the primary question. And then number of persons served by the community, and then number of persons from your congregation engaged in community outreach. Moving on, for Baltimore-Washington Conference folks, this is the worksheet for identifying the church mission and community ministry activity costs for expenses and such, and utilities that can be used to adjust line 48B. We have a full walkthrough of that on the church conference stats. The Baltimore-Washington Conference stats website. As Dave was saying, next table is assets and expenses. So he did a great walkthrough of the meanings for all these. So I don't want to waste your time on breaking those out again. But as you're going through, just pay attention to specific wording for each of these to make sure you're putting the right information into each of these values. So assets and then debt are grouped. And then these questions here, apportionment, UMC giving, special Sundays, and direct giving, those are supplied by the conference. So those are numbers that that have been submitted through your apportionment, et cetera. We've tracked on the conference side. We will upload those, and you do not have to worry about entering those in.
And John, I do want to interrupt you.
Sure.
So this is an area where the processes of conferences differ. We upload some information and supply it. And in Peninsula Delaware, there are other areas that are tagged where they do the same. So some things may vary depending on the conference as far as what the conference is supplying versus where you can put that in.
Understood. So for both conferences, just paying attention to what the labels are, and if you find something you can't enter data into and you think you should, it's most likely something we enter, or it's, as I was saying before, one of the questions that total from another set of questions. Next, we have the direct giving and outreach costs and such that we mentioned for that total into from that worksheet for 48B for B2C folks. And again, pension and health for B2C and PDC, that is entered by the conference. Moving on to base compensation, we always put the senior pastor or primary pastor as the first question. Associate pastors is next, and then the deacons and diaconal ministries as the third. For housing benefits, this is something that had some confusion from last year. So parsonage rental expenses for the lead pastor. This is primarily for folks in the PDC. This is where we derive this from because it's integral to their functioning. But this is not for rent you've received from the rental of a parsonage. That would go into income. This is for if you happen to be renting a piece of land or an apartment or a house or something like that for the lead pastor's parsonage or the associate pastor's parsonage. So if you are expending money to have a piece of property via rental, that's where this would go. Not if you are earning money from a rental. Just want to make sure that was clear. And this is a great example of one that will total. So you would enter the figures for parsonage maintenance and utilities for the lead pastor, rental costs, and allowance in here, and they will total into 55A. So you will not actually directly enter the number into 55A, but the total of these three should be what 55A is. Moving on to other benefits, accountable reimbursement and non-accountable reimbursement and cash allowances paid. And then salary benefits to paid to all other church staff and diaconal ministers. So this is the general staff outside of your pastoral staff. Operations and programs, amount spent for local church program expenses and operating expenses. There are sometimes confusion as to what these are. We do a pretty good explanation here and also in the training documentation. So feel free to look at those things. But if you have any questions after that, feel free to contact us. Next we have debt and capital payments. As Dave was saying, there is a difference between capital expenses and capital. My brain is stalling.
Capital campaigns and capital expenses.
Thank you. Sorry. So just being mindful of, again, what you are specifically identifying here. So total amount paid for capital campaigns or fundraising costs, and the total amount paid for the principal, interest, and indebtedness mortgages, and the total amount paid on capital expenditures for building improvements and major equipment purchases. And then we move on to the table 3, which is income. Number of giving units is the number of households or individuals recorded as by name as contributors for the year in support of the annual budget. We've had some confusion there in the past, just making sure that that is understood. And then again, this is another one where all of these 67A through G will total into 67. Again, the numbers are different for Pendel, but the concept is the same. Capital campaigns, again, not the same thing as expenditures, but capital campaigns. And then other sources and connectional funds. One thing that has been a question for different things that you've received outside of the conference. So grants you received from organizations that are non-conference, non-denominational institutions, that's where 69C would be. That would be different than if you've received something from the district and such, just to make sure that there's a good difference, understanding of that difference as receiving funds. And in the end, the grand total for the church income would be down here. When you have completed all of your entry and you have entered in explanations wherever they are at, you'd receive the submit button. I'm actually going to bear with me for 20 seconds here. I'm going to turn on our actual stats real quick. I want to make sure you guys can see that. And I apologize for not having this prepped previously.
While John's doing that, I wanted to mention one of the last areas he covered in the income side. There were areas where a church would report equitable compensation or other report for pastors. We do get questions frequently about that. An example I'm just going to use is say a pastor's salary is $50,000, but the church is receiving $10,000 in equitable compensation support or other type of conference grants for that. This is one of and I think the only area that I can think of where even though the church is getting a portion of that that's not coming out of their pocket, GCFA lets us know as conferences they really want to know the actual compensation the pastor is receiving. So if the pastor is receiving $50,000, $10,000 of that is being given to the church to help support that compensation. You would still report $50,000 on table 2 as the expense, but then just make sure that on table 3 you report the $10,000 in conference support you have for the compensation package.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. And heading back into the page, thank you for your patience with that. So when you get to the point where you're ready to submit, you'll see the submit button up here. If you submit with questions that are still not answered, you'll receive this. If you click on these links, it'll actually take you to the question that has not been answered yet. So you can kind of give you a guide as to what needs to be done before you finish. So that's going to be an important thing when you're actually adding this in. I'm filling in some bunk here for that. But as best as you can, as Dave said, it does not have to be a lengthy explanation, but just to give us some idea as to what has happened to increase good or bad. The context for that can actually really be informative and helpful for us as we look at aberrations in kind of the average for folks. Still have more that are not correct. So this is letting me know that the ethnicity total and gender total are do not equal the total professing members. So if you reach the end of your submit process, you've got all your questions answered, and this total and this total do not match, then it will not allow you to submit. So I'm going to write that question real quick. And then the one was 67. When you do have everything ready, again, you should receive the green answers validated, and you can hit submit report. And then you'll receive this splash screen where you're going to add your name, your email, and your position so we can know who submitted it. This is really important for us to go back and check with you if, for instance, we see errors that the system didn't stop from getting from sending in, or if we wanted to review some of the questions with you. The other piece of that is as we're going through and doing corrections, we'll be sending out an email shortly after the submission process is completed for statistical reports, asking you to fill out a survey that validates the questions that you've answered. This is going to be very important for the Baltimore-Washington conference specifically, given our timeline. We really need this to be answered as accurate as possible. And even if everything is correct, we'd really like to hear from you. So as you receive those validation surveys, please use that to submit corrections to your information after you've submitted. So we put our name in here. Choose our position. This way, if we hit something, this error is because we're using a test church. You can ignore this. You'll receive another green splash screen saying that your annual report has been submitted when it is completed. The other thing is, if you have a note that you wanted to throw into, for us to know as you submit something, you can add that note here as well. If you get to here and you're still not sure about something, you can go back and review answers. It'll open the report back up for you guys to look at before you submit again. And with that, that is the completion of our walkthrough of the actual AC Stats system. See, we got lots of questions coming in now.
We do have lots of questions. And welcome, Tanya, from your library.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go through these randomly because they're coming from different areas. Somebody has asked, is there a worksheet or can you download a blank copy of the report so you can fill it out prior to entering the data online?
Yes, in fact, let me pop in there and actually demonstrate that. I apologize for not actually going through that. So we have both a system. We've got a worksheet that you can actually download that has all the questions and instructions for those questions on the resource pages for each conference. In addition, when you're in the AC Stats system, if you go to print here in the middle, right at the top, you can print year-over-year reports. You can print the current values report, which will bring up the 2023 values. You can bring a blank report or a charts report. So I'll demonstrate each one of these because this is a new feature that is kind of exciting. So a year-over-year report will look like, it'll take a minute to chug because it's actually taking the information from the stats and creating a PDF for you. When you download it, open up here. Swap my share real quick.
I'm going to let you keep doing that, John. We've got a number of questions and we're running short on time. So I'm going to jump back into some of the questions as you're working on getting that. Where would somebody, I know there's a section for employees of the church expenses. What if it's a contract employee? Where would they enter that expense?
So there is an area for expenses that for other church staff, salaried church staff. For contract staff, we usually advise to report it in the area in which that staff serves. So if it's a contract janitor or custodian, that's a part of the operating expense of the church. A contract organist would be part of the program expense of the church. So it depends on their function, would be where you want to report it.
A couple more income questions, then we have some questions for you around church conference and church conference procedures, Tanya, but some more income question. One of the churches that is participating tonight received some conference support for substitute pastoral coverage. It wasn't for salary. It was, I think, for covering a pulpit while they did not have a pastor. Where would that get reported?
So that could get reported in the income page under the conference support. And there's a equitable comp area and then just an area for conference grants and other general support. So you would report it there.
Okay. Some more income questions. One church received a bequest that's coming from multiple sources, some from a bank, some from an insurance company, and it's coming in over multiple years. Do they report the income each year as it comes in, or do they wait till the total bequest has been finalized to report the income?
Okay, so that's a great question. So statistics are the actual reporting of the actual either income received or cash outlay paid. So if in that example, if somebody says, hey, you're going to receive $50,000, but we're going to give you $25,000 this year and $25,000 next year, the actual receipt of that income in that year is when you report it. Similarly, if you have a major expense, say the roof repair that you need is a $50,000 repair, and you don't have the money to pay it, so you take out a loan, and you are paying that back every year. The payment of the loan in any given year towards that capital expense is the amount that's recorded as the capital expense, not the lump sum that's a part of the loan. So again, it probably makes more sense for folks in the accounting business, but I always say it's a cash basis, tangible basis is really what the stats are based on, and it does kind of help you answer some of those questions when they come in.
Some more income questions. If a church receives grant money to buy material like carts, racks, freezers for the church's food pantry, where does the grant money get recorded as income, and where does the items purchased get recorded as expense?
So the grant is going to be in the middle of page 3 under other sources and connectional funds. There's if it's received from the conference, there's a area for conference income grants, and then there's some churches receive grants from governmental agencies. The county may give them a grant for their food security program or unhoused program and that sort of thing. There's a governmental or institutional area as well. And then the expenditure is going to depend on the type of expense it is, where it would be reported on table 2. If it's a missional expense, just make sure you're reporting it in the missional expense category. Again, we don't want to apportion you on any sort of missional expense, so just make sure you report it in the right area.
Okay, a couple more. These two are kind of related, but two different questions, related topic. If a parsonage is sold, where do they report that income?
So that's also table 3. And I'm looking at it here. Let's see. In the capital campaigns and other designated projects, there's a funds received from other sources and projects, and it says including sale of buildings. So that's where you would want to put that. Okay.
Now this may be too specific, and they may need to reach out to their administrator or their DA. A church sold its parsonage and deposited the money in the bank.
Okay.
The money was stolen from the bank, and the insurance company will be reimbursing them, but not until 2025. We get some of the best questions.
You do. I'm going to say that has never been asked before.
I have never, in the 6 years we've been doing this, I don't recall that question, Dave. So if that's one that may be best for them to reach out to you privately.
I would say this kind of goes to, again, the tangible and cash basis. So if you have $50,000 of money in your hand, you're going to report that income. If it is no longer in your hands, you do not want to report it. But when the insurance company reimburses you, you can report it in the year that you receive the reimbursement.
Okay.
Maybe something like throwing it in out.
Yes, it's kind of in that category.
Because
Okay.
it's
We don't like the out portion of that. It's unfortunate, but yes,
Very
that's a good
unfortunate,
example.
but I think that's a helpful answer. And then last two around stats, and then we'll get to Tanya. Someone just wants to make sure that there's only to be one person submitting per church. Like
So
one
that's-
submission per church.
Right. So that'll be easy because once the system receives that submission, it in effect locks the statistics.
Okay.
So even if you had another person that went in there and decided they wanted to do the submission, they would not be able to. They would see that it's locked and not an option.
Okay.
That does bring a point that up until the point of the last date of Wednesday, January 29th at midnight, if you need your report unlocked to make a correction, we can do that for you. Not the correction, but to unlock it so you can go in and make the correction and resubmit. That's actually preferable if it's before the deadline. If it's after the deadline, we want it in the survey.
All right. Thank you. And last process question, then we'll get to Tanya's questions. If you complete part of the data at a particular time, will it automatically save when you hit the green save button?
So nice thing is there's no green save button. The old system, there was in each table a save button that would save the work for that table. The new system is actually a leap ahead in that as soon as you tab or hit the tab key or enter key on your keyboard to save the entry of that question, that specific question,
okay,
everything is saved. So it's saving as you're going.
If I'm working on question 8A and I put the answer in and I hit save for 8A, but then I get called away from my computer, I can go back and I'll be ready to answer question 9.
Exactly. Right back where you left it.
Perfect. All righty, Tanya, get ready. These are questions pertaining to actions taken at church or charge conference that affect statistics. Question 1. How many years does it take to remove members per church conference that they could then be removed on the statistical report?
It takes 3 years. So what you're going to do is you're going to include them on year 1, saying we're reaching out to them. And then year 2, we are still reaching out to them because we haven't heard from them. And then year 3 is where you vote them off the membership rolls. And then once you do that, then you can include it into the stats reports.
Thank you. If someone has withdrawn from the church but not requested a letter of transfer, are they still on the membership rolls, and do you count them?
I would say count them. I would say that because as John and Dave are showing you, your first line is going to be your number at the end of this year. So next year, when you go to deduct them, your numbers aren't going to match up and you aren't going to know why. So I would say keep them until they actually come off your rolls.
All right, so then I'm gonna ask this question a little bit differently. If somebody requests in writing to be withdrawn from the membership, but they don't want to transfer someplace else, so the pastor receives a letter from Tanya Bennett that says, "Please remove me from Acme United Methodist Church. I have no plans to join anywhere else." Where would that then be listed on the statistical report?
I do not have the stats in front of me, but they would definitely come off. Go ahead, John.
No, so my inclination would be to, if it is members that are transferring out to non-United Methodist churches.
No, they're not transferring to any church. They're just withdrawing, period.
So I can help. Right. I can help on that one. So that is a common occurrence. So in table 1 up at the top, the area that says members withdrawn from professing membership, if you don't know where they've withdrawn, but that's all you know, that's where you will report them. Once they request a letter of transfer, depending on where they're being transferred to, you're going to report them as transferred out to a United Methodist Church or transferred out to a non-United Methodist Church. So those are your options that kind of cover all the bases.
And then
Sorry, thank
last
you, Dave.
but not least, we've got a half a second, and you're safe from this one, Tanya. Thank you, though. Your answers were very helpful. So last year, and I think you've addressed this, but maybe we need to hear it again a little differently. Last year, people were advised that hitting the save button saved and locked the report. Is that the same this year?
So there is no save button, but there is a submit button. So if you hit the submit button, it'll take you through that process. But there are two screens before you get to the point where you cannot access the stats again without contacting us. So if you hit submit and receive, let me get back to that for you real quick.
Yeah, GCFA makes it very hard to do that accidentally. It's a several step process. So even if you think you are drawn to the save button to save your work, at some point I guarantee you will be made aware that possibly you're going down the wrong path. And I know we all want to keep our work saved, but
so yeah, if you hit submit, you'll have that thing, the splash saying your report is submitted, and then you come here. If you've come here and you did not want to submit your report, all you have to do is hit review answers, and it'll take you back, and you can still continue entering information. So don't be compelled to hit the submit button. I know that it has a little save disk icon, but that doesn't mean that you need to hit it to save the information.
So so what I'm hearing you say is so for example, on line 1 that you just had there, once I enter the number 18 and I tab to question 2, or I click on question 2, that 18 is saved in that field unless I change it.
Precisely.
Excellent. Until I hit submit officially.
To demonstrate.
And it locks it out forever until you can open it for me. I see that. Excellent.
Yep.
Well,
that is saved. You don't have to do anything else.
John and Dave and Tanya, thank you so much. I'm going to give I got a new shout out. You might have something else. I do have, so let you get in the last word, then I'm going to give some announcements and a new shout out today. Anything else for the good of our participants?
I would just say thank you all for your work in this. I know it takes concern and planning throughout the year, and please don't feel like you have to navigate all of this on your own. We try every year to put a plethora of training resources on our website that are in addition to this as well. And each of us have district administrators that you can reach out to. If you stump them on a question, your district administrators can then reach out to John and I, and we can usually get you what you need. So please don't hesitate to ask any question you want, either via email or phone. We're here to help you.
Wonderful. Those who are participating, if you could drop in the chat while we do some announcements, drop a thank you in the chat to our presenters. We are recording tonight. It will be uploaded to all of the various conference and Episcopal area websites. We'd like to have that by Friday. I will tell you, with holidays and vacations, I'm not sure who's in or out in terms of our video editing capabilities. So if it's not, it will be by the beginning of the year. So you'll have it in plenty of time. We'll also include tonight's PowerPoint for you to refer back to. I used to always say welcome to our conference lay leader, Dolores Martin. She's no longer our conference lay leader, but she loves coming to Training Tuesday. But I will add, this year, the DCM, the discipleship. I'm just losing names today. I'll just say Jacqueline,
Director of Connectional Ministries.
Director of Connectional Ministry. Thank you. I'm getting a John brain freeze today. Jacqueline Ford, who's the Director of Connectional Ministries for the Peninsula Delaware Conference, has been at every Training Tuesday this fall. So I have to say thanks for coming again tonight, Jacqueline. You don't have to fill out statistical reports, but you still get to come and participate. We appreciate that. And thank you all. This is our last Training Tuesday for 2024. So I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your Advent, a very Merry Christmas that lasts all the way through Epiphany, and a very Happy New Year. God bless you all. And we will be in touch about some of our next topics coming into 2025. Have a lovely evening. Bye now.